I have really learnt to love sharing my story. I mean the vulnerable parts, the raw parts, the stories that before I used to feel really ashamed. And I don't have a problem sharing them in boardrooms and on the stages because I've learnt to see the power of storytelling. But what I can share with you is I didn't always feel this comfortable around sharing my story. You see, I saw brilliant communicators, and the key difference to brilliant communicators than to ordinary communicators was their way to share stories. The way they were able to infuse everything just with a story. But I often thought, how do I know which story to share? How do I know how much of my story to share? And then I also had a lot of fears around sharing my story. And I mean real fears because of the shame that I held with many of the stories. But it wasn't until this moment when I had just secured that next big promotion in my corporate career that my manager at the time approached me and said, Michelle, I'd love you to share your story with your colleagues and with other senior managers. And this caught me a little bit off guard because I'm like, this is my story. This is really personal. He said, your story can really shine a light around what you did in owning your career path. Okay. I didn't really see that much of a benefit in what he meant by that. I didn't quite understand that. And sharing stories in corporate, personal, vulnerable, raw, real stories in corporate was not really done. But I really had a lot of trust in my manager. And that was because he was so open, vulnerable, and sharing stories. So I did it. I shared my story on the stage in front of colleagues that were who I used to report to that now were on the same level, and senior managers as well. And that moment when I stood on that stage and shared my story, that's when I saw the shift. I saw people leaning in, really genuinely interested in what I had to say, genuinely interested in my ideas and my thoughts. And I could almost see the light bulbs going on. And I saw the impact of storytelling right in that moment. And that's when I knew I really wanted to get better at storytelling, to understand it really in its depth, to see the magic of storytelling. You see, my manager, he was brilliant at storytelling. In fact, every time he would do a presentation, a new concept, or want to influence change in the company, or educate, or really get people on board with a vision, with a project, he would always infuse storytelling. I watched him. I said, what makes him such a great communicator? And it was the storytelling. Just that was the common thread in all of it. And so as I went on my journey to becoming a better storyteller, I really learned 3 key things, and I want to share that with you today. The first one is to see your story. You see, I didn't see my story, that my career path was important and beneficial for others. I trusted him and I lent in, even in the fear. But that's the first point, is to see your story. And I can share with you that process is a process of going inwards, of really connecting to your story, the parts of your story, seeing the parts of you, even the ones that you have shame around, even the ones you may hold anger or guilt. Because when you can start to see your story, then you start to accept the brilliance of your story. That's the first thing. You need to see your story and that it matters and that your journey, right? Every piece has a purpose. So that takes me to the second one, is purpose. When it comes to sharing your story, and whether that's to educate, to shift a perspective, an idea, a thinking, a thought, or maybe you want to influence and bring people on board with a project or enroll them into your offers, your programs, your mission, whatever that is, the story that you share needs to have a purpose. Why are you sharing the story? Is it purely just to educate and teach a concept? Is it because you want people to have a shift in perspective, a new idea, an insight? Or maybe you want to influence and impact change in an industry or in the work that you do. Or maybe you want them to, come on board on the mission or join your project or join your offering. Your story needs to have a purpose. So when it comes to knowing which story to select, which one to share, you want to be able to connect it to the purpose. Why am I sharing this particular story? Or maybe it's the opposite way. It's like, I really want to teach people and educate or shift the perspective. I wonder which part of my story can help in that. And the third thing is to start small. When it comes to sharing your real raw truth, that vulnerable, that one you may hold anger, shame, sadness, is to start small. You don't need to share all parts of the story. You get to choose what part to share. And as you build that muscle of sharing openly, vulnerably, right, it becomes stronger. And then you can expand as it feels comfortable for you. And what I would also encourage is to do it in spaces and places that help in building that muscle, where it feels safe to be yourself, safe to speak up, safe to be imperfect and messy. Stories have a way to connect your audience to you. They get to know who you are. It builds that bridge of trust and connection. People start to see elements of their story through your story. People start to see what's possible. And people start to get a new insight, a new thinking, an aha, a breakthrough. That's the power of story. But aside from that, storytelling takes your dots, your dot points, your data, your motivational quotes, and it puts it into a beautiful picture. See, I see often women leaders and business owners, they're out there sharing their ideas, their tips, their strategies, their data, but they're lacking a really important key, and that's the story, connecting all the dots. Because The human brain, when it's receiving dot points, data, statistics, little tips, it's kind of like a puzzle with all the pieces scattered around the brain. But storytelling helps to put all those pieces together and forms a beautiful picture. That's the benefit of storytelling. And when you learn to see your story and the way it connects to the purpose, that's when the magic of having your message, your ideas, your impact starts to land. Because it's no longer information spread out, it's a picture. Imagine having a picture that's only half painted, because that's what I see. A lot of leaders and owners who communicate, they only communicate half the picture. The story completes the picture. So this is why I'm so passionate about, I like to call it the storytelling advantage. And if you're finding yourself sharing your ideas, your dot points, your statistics, but somehow you just cannot get people over the line, I want to invite you to check in with yourself and go, am I sharing the story that connects the dots to this? Or am I just sharing dot points? And the other thing I want to leave you with is there is an art to storytelling. It's not like you can chat GPT your story and let it spit out. Sure, you can do that. But there is an art form of weaving it together and then standing at the boardroom or on a stage and taking people on the journey of storytelling. And this is what I love to do with women, helping them tap into that story that's untold. You know the one. You know the story that needs to be told, but you are so afraid of the rejection, the judgment. I get it. I've been there. But when you finally heal those parts and see the story that really matters, you see that you matter. And then you find it your service, your duty to share it, because you know that by sharing it, it's going to create the ripple effect that you deeply desire. Whether that's at the boardroom, in your job, or in the mission and the business that you do. And it's one of the many reasons why storytelling and unlocking that and healing those parts, there is a process to that. It's quite delicate to be held, to heal your story, to then write it and speak it. It liberates your voice to another level. It's one of the reasons why I created the Speak Your Story retreat, where you remove yourself from the day-to-day, 5 nights in a beautiful place of Bali, which is all about healing, where we look into those stories, release the fears around that, heal what needs to be healed, and tap into that key story, that untold story that's going to unlock and change that impact, that ripple effect that you truly deeply desire. This is 5 nights immersed in the beautiful Ubud in Bali, a place where you can reset, reconnect to you, your truth, your story, and rise in speaking that story. Because at the end of the 5 days, you'll get to speak and share that story on the stage in front of the women there in all of its beauty and brilliance. Delicious. I get so excited talking about it. Now, if you want to know more about the Speak Your Story retreat, drop me a message, because it is by application. I only take 8 women at a time, because this is deep work. And it truly is the game changer for you, your leadership, and your business. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode all about the storytelling advantage. And I'll see you same time, same place next week. Mwah.